I think New World is killing casual play and it has me worried for the future of the game. I've said before that New World is creating a wealthy 1%. Well, now I'm starting to think that the game might just be designed for the hardcore players and the casual players might be getting a little bit left behind. Now, to some of you that will be music to your ears. You like the fact that games are designed to hardcore players, but to me it sort of indicates that the game might be heading in the wrong direction. The January PTR patch seems to cement the idea that the game is not for casuals, and for the first time in forever I'm actually a little bit worried about the future health of the game. When we had all the bugs and the exploits and stuff like that, of course we expected player numbers to drop, but I always anticipated and expected that it would like bounce back and stabilize, and so it has proven. But now I'm not so sure the game is going where it's going to be as popular enough to sustain itself. So what am I actually complaining about in this video? Well, two main things. I think they're essentially going to be creating a toxic environment that's essentially by design, and I don't think casual players are going to enjoy that. And they're also going to be adding more grind, and I think that grind is coming a little bit too quickly. So the expedition mutator rewards are determined by how well you do in that expedition. So you get better rewards the better you perform, which sounds fine conceptually. But I think what's actually going to happen is what I think happened with World of Warcraft Mythic Plus, is that it's going to create a toxic environment. And I really feel like that this could have been avoided. Now, for some players, like you like that challenge, you want to try and speedrun that content, and you'll be like getting a lot of joy from this system. But for a lot of casual players, I think it's just going to put them right off and they might not even attempt it at all. So for example, the quicker that you do the expedition, the better your rewards. Sounds fine again. However, what I think is going to happen with that is that you're going to create like another toxic environment where players are sort of rushing through it and getting stressed. It's a similar thing with players dying. If you die in the expedition mutator, well, all of the rewards for your team are lowered. Now, whilst we want difficult content, I don't necessarily think the stress of this is going to be worth it. Like the stress of having to rush through the expedition and the stress if anybody dies, well, like I feel like that's going to create a lot of arguments. They'll be like, oh, well, you played incorrectly there, you've wasted my time, I'm angry with you. It doesn't sound fun. And for me, I want difficult content, sure, I'm all for difficult content, but I want to enjoy it like at my pace with the people that I want to play with. I don't want to be like optimizing the hell out of everything and having to rush through expeditions. I want fun, not stress. And on the PTR, the actual cost of the keys are not insignificant. From your faction vendor, you'll be able to get one for 10,000 faction tokens and 1,000 gold, and you will be able to craft them using reasonable materials that I think are probably more than the faction vendor time and effort, but it is what it is. But the fact that there is a cost to this as well basically means that not only if you like die or you're not very quick will you be possibly wasting people's time, it means that essentially that you're going to be costing somebody gold and effort as well. And that is if you can even get in a group, because it seems that there's some sort of gear score scaling on an individual level. Now for me, I hate the concept of gear score. For me, it should just be that your item is either good or it's not. Like the actual stats on the item should determine the quality of the item, not a gear score that has been assigned to it. But if you don't have high enough gear score, you're going to take more damage, which means a lot of parties and groups are going to be like, okay, link me all of your stuff so I can prove that you are the gear score that you say you are. Now there might be a little system where it actually tells you the average gear score of the party, so you might be able to figure out if somebody's telling the truth or not, which actually just adds another layer of like potential toxic behavior. What I'm saying there is if you don't have high enough gear score, well, you might not cut the mustard and you might not even get invited to these groups. So you might only be able to make your own key and start from there. I just think that the difficulty of the content should be the thing that gives you the rewards. It shouldn't be how quickly you do it, etc., or how often you die. It should be that, okay, you managed to achieve it, then we're going to give you the rewards. Not, oh, well, you didn't achieve it quickly enough for our liking, so we're not going to give you rewards that are good enough. I never really minded expedition keys. Like, I don't really like them, but they were sort of meh. But I personally just want to enjoy the game at like a reasonable pace. Sometimes I want hard content for sure, but I don't really want a super toxic environment. And the game sort of seems to be setting itself up for that. I was very excited about the mutators, but now I'm wondering if I'm even going to bother like participating in them. And if I'm not going to do them, maybe I should stop playing for a couple of months until there's content that I actually do want to do. I know that sounds dramatic, but these mutators are actually going to be the main source of progression for the foreseeable future. Sure, you will actually be able to sort of catch up by crafting and gypsum and stuff like that, but the expedition mutators are going to progress at a much quicker rate. For example, you can't get a similar level of progression from PvP. And that leads on to the second main point. Why are we getting a new grindy progression system right now? Is it not too soon? Now, I know there'll be some of you out there who'd be like, I've only played 400 hours and I'm max expertise. Fine, I'm in that sort of camp myself. I'm sort of like a super casual, if you will. I'm a casual player, but because I'm doing YouTube, I'm obviously like trying to play probably more than I even want to kind of thing, which is fine. I accept accept that as the burden of trying to make YouTube content. I'm not complaining about that. But the point is that we're getting a new progression system right now, which is possibly, what, 3-4 months after the game has come out? It feels maybe a little bit quick, and that you're going to constantly be on a treadmill if this is something that they do every 3 months. Now, a treadmill is what MMOs are designed for. You're always going to be getting new kinds of progression. Things generally don't stay static, and players would be bored if they do. It's all about finding the right balance between your hardcore players like maximizing their progression and the casuals actually not feeling like they're just on a constant endless loop of progression. And when I say progression, we're talking about literally an increase in gear score. We're going to go from 600 to 625, and the only way that you're going to get to that 625 is from the Umbral Shard system. This is going to be a system where you take a pre-existing 600 item and you upgrade it to 625. Those Umbral Shards you primarily get from expedition mutators, but secondly you can get them from crafting and you can get them from the gypsum cast. So it's not like the content is not available, it's just going to be harder for people to catch up. Basically, they're deliberately slowing down the casual players getting there, which is fine. It's an understandable system. However, they did say in the developer chat that in December most players had not maximized their expertise, and that's why they added the gypsum. I just can't believe that the majority of players right now are completely capped out on expertise. I just personally don't believe that to be the case. Now, maybe Amazon can prove me wrong because they've got the data, but I just don't think so. Especially when you look on like Steam stats and you see stuff like Lazarus has apparently only been completed by 3% of players. Now, the counter to that is actually most players literally aren't playing the game anymore, so you would need to see how many players are like still playing versus how many have actually done Lazarus to even know where we are in the content like skew, basically. Sure, we know that the people who have played more than 400 hours etc will all be maxed out, and there's a risk that they would get bored. But you know what I think you need instead of a new grind? I think you need like horizontal or sideways progression and content that is actually just fun for the sake of it being fun. Like, imagine we now had like PvP arenas that were like ranked instead of expedition mutators. You wouldn't need to increase the gear score or anything like that, and I feel like that would get a lot of players excited. Now granted, it wouldn't be great for the PvEers out there, but the PvPers would have a great time. For the PvEers, well, you could have just introduced maybe like a new expedition that instead of increasing the gear score, maybe it had unique items in there with like new perks that you could only get from that expedition. Just something like that, which doesn't necessarily mean it's more grindy for players, but you're actually just adding content for players. Expedition mutators are taking what you've already got, tweaking them a little bit and being like, there's your new content, which is fine, but it's not going to be good enough to like sustain the game indefinitely. I'm not really looking forward to having to grind my expertise first to 600 from 590 because that's what we're going to have to do, and then essentially from 600 to 625 using this Umbral Shard system. I also strongly dislike that only items that are gear score 600 can be upgraded. It means that anything that's basically not 600 effectively becomes almost worthless. And they do say you need to make sure that you're going to be using this Umbral system to maintain a PvP competitive advantage. It's literally in the like press release. So now the best way to get PvP gear is to actually do PvE, and in a toxic environment. Great. I personally think that the gear score system overall is actually just a bad system. I don't really like it at all, and I also think that it's just too early for progression. Now, I'm not saying, some people are saying like it should be in 6 months time. I don't necessarily think we should have had to have waited that long, but maybe like every 6 months, so maybe in 2-3 months would have been a good speed. But New World now is developing for its hardcore fans, and everybody else is going to get left behind. And I worry that means that those players will simply leave the game. Now, as I said before, MMOs are always treadmills. There's always more and more to do, but I just worry that this treadmill is actually going a little bit too fast for me and I might have to get off. And I also worry that a lot of other casual players will be like, yeah, I'm not enjoying that treadmill either. I don't like the fact that there's no actual proper PvP progression. You can't really get great gear from PvPing. The loot crates that you get from Outpost Rush, they're okay, but I literally have never actually taken any gear from that and worn it. So it's very difficult to gear up just via PvP. And now it's essentially impossible because you don't get Umbral Shards doing Outpost Rush or anything like that. So you can maybe get 600 item gear score, but then you would have to do something else to get that up. So yeah, overall, I've got to say I'm actually a little bit worried. I expected mutators to be hard, sure, that's the whole point of the system. But what I don't really want is a stressful, toxic environment. Like, it's actually just supposed to be fun. I don't really fancy doing another grind right now. Like, it's actually supposed to be fun. It's not a job. I think like that's the key principle here. It's supposed to be enjoyable content that gives you rewards and progression, not progression for the sake of progression. So I honestly don't know if New World is going to be suitable for casual players anymore. Looking at this, my instinct says no, but we'll have to wait and see what they introduce in the future. But not that it ever actually was suitable for casual players. It sort of seemed like it was because most of the things were attainable for a casual player. Like you could, if you wanted, maybe just level up armoring and just go out farming and gathering, and for a casual player you probably could get some decent gear and you wouldn't be very far behind. But now it sort of feels like a lot of casual players are almost going to be locked out from the progression. Yes, you can get it from crafting, and yes, you can get it from the gypsum system, but I strongly suspect that the expedition mutators are going to be by far the most effective way of getting your progression up. So we'll have to see what kind of like balance we have there. So it might be that the gypsum system and stuff like that is all fine, but I personally doubt it. So yeah, we're happy that there's new PvE content. I do think that the newness of the content is a little bit questionable as well, but I'm happy with the idea of these hard modes. What I just don't like is having the stress of having like, oh, it's timed, or if you die, it's going to lower everybody's like rewards. For me, it should be like, okay, what we're going to do is increase the difficulty of the expeditions, and if you just like manage to complete it, hey, you get the rewards. That's it. If you like this video, then do press like. If you're interested in new world content, then do subscribe. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.